Welcome back. Oklahoma could be home to the first publicly funded religious charter school in the United States. And a state school board there is getting instant pushback after approving its application. The virtual Catholic school in Oklahoma won approval for taxpayer funding Monday, approving St. Isidore of Seville Catholic Virtual Charter School's application by a 3-2 vote. The online school would be open to kindergarten through 12th grade students across the state. Oklahoma's Attorney General, though, warns the school board the approval of any publicly funded religious school is unconstitutional and, quote, contrary to Oklahoma law and not in the best interest of taxpayers.
Well, Brett Farley is Executive Director of the Catholic Conference of Oklahoma, and he joins us now. Brett, welcome to you. So let's pick up where Jenna just left off with the Attorney General's statement. Is a state-sponsored religious charter school in Oklahoma unconstitutional? And if not, why?
It absolutely isn't. If we look at recent Supreme Court decisions, the last 3 decisions over the last 6 years on this subject, the Supreme Court's been very clear. A state's not required to give public funds to private schools, but if they choose to do that, they cannot prohibit religious institutions from participating in those programs. And so that's all we're doing is extending that constitutional right afforded to us by the U.S. Supreme Court.
The Oklahoma Attorney General, pretty outspoken against this. Does he have the power to overrule the charter school board's approval?
Thankfully, he does not. And I think it's important also to point out that his predecessor, who left office in November, wrote the seminal opinion stating exactly the opposite, that per the Supreme Court's decisions, we are not only in the right to be approved, but it's actually something that the state should be doing, should be approving religious liberty, because, again, we're already doing this across the board in many states where we're giving public dollars to private religious schools. And so a charter school isn't really all that different than any other iteration of school choice, whether it's an ESA or a tax credit or a scholarship. And so it's a distinction without a difference.
So can I get you to respond to his statement specifically then, if he's saying a school board approval of any publicly funded religious school is unconstitutional and contrary to Oklahoma law and not in the best interest of taxpayers? How do you even respond to that? Why do you think he's making that claim?
Well, what he's referring to is both the state constitution and state statute that stem from the Blaine amendments, which have become quite notorious across the country. They were put into many state constitutions in the early part of the 20th century and were blatantly anti-religious. Those are the amendments that the Supreme Court has referred to as being unconstitutional and express violations of the First Amendment. So the Attorney General is just wrong. The Supreme Court's been very clear 3 times, and so we're deferring to a Supreme Court precedent here.
This has both sides fired up, and what about possible unintended consequences if we see taxpayer funding for religious schools? Could there then in turn be, say, a satanic school curriculum?
Sure, it's a warranted concern. It's one thing that we need to take seriously with respect to any school choice program. What I think it's important to remember here is that Oklahoma is like many of the states that have been very innovative on the school choice front, implementing a new tax credit program just 2 weeks ago, where tax dollars are going to private schools, including religious schools, scholarships, ESAs, all sorts of programs of school choice. That threat is true for all of those, and yet we still don't see any satanic schools being established anywhere in the country. The reason for that is that there's no demand for them. Market choices and market forces are still at play here, regardless of the fact that there's public money going to these programs. And so if there are no parents demanding satanic education, then you're not going to see any schools established.
Brett, real quickly here in the a few seconds we have left, do you think this might end up at the Supreme Court?
It's very possible. We've already seen 3 cases similar to this arrive at the U.S. Supreme Court. And so, it really depends on our opponents and where they file. It's very possible they file in the federal court, and no matter what that court, the lower court says, it will probably be appealed ultimately to circuit and then finally to the Supreme Court. So we would welcome that. We think it's a question that the U.S. Supreme Court should answer finally. If they do, it'll be the final chapter in this long conversation about what religious liberty really means in America, what the First Amendment means, and what exercise means to Americans.
All right, Brett Farley with the Catholic Conference of Oklahoma. Thank you, Brett.
Thanks, Brett.
Thank you all.